The rain started the moment my birthday cake appeared. Looking back, maybe that should have been my first warning. Dallas thunderstorms in September aren't unusual, but this one crashed down with perfect dramatic timing. Right as my mom walked into our cramped living room holding a store-bought chocolate cake with 18 blue candles flickering in the dim light. "Make a wish, Lucas," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I remember thinking how tired she looked, how the corners of her mouth twitched with effort as she tried to make this moment special. Behind her, Richard, my stepdad, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the small gathering of my friends with thinly veiled contempt. His eyes found mine across the room, and I quickly looked away. A reflex developed, over years of avoiding his disapproval. "Yeah, Lucas, make a wish!" my best friend Marcus shouted, clapping me on the back. "Maybe wish for that scholarship letter to finally show up." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Richard. I closed my eyes and leaned toward the candles, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. What do you wish for when you've spent your entire life feeling like an intruder in your own home? For 18 years, I'd wished for the same thing. To be wanted. To be claimed. To be someone's first choice. But birthday wishes are like pennies in a fountain. They pile up at the bottom, forgotten and tarnished. "Before you blow out those candles," Richard's voice cut through the room like a knife, "I think it's time for some truth." The room went quiet. My mother froze, the cake trembling slightly in her hands. "Richard," she whispered, "please, not now." But Richard had been drinking. I could tell by the flush on his neck, the slight sway in his stance as he pushed himself off the wall and walked toward the center of the room. My stomach twisted into a familiar knot. "You know what I've been thinking, Laura?" he continued, ignoring her plea. "I've been thinking that 18 is a magical number. It means we're finally done." Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me. My other friends, Aisha and Trey, exchanged glances. The three of them had witnessed enough uncomfortable moments at my house over the years to sense when something bad was brewing. "Let's just cut the cake," I suggested, forcing a smile. "Mom made my favorite. You know what else I've been thinking?" Richard talked over me as if I hadn't spoken. "I've been thinking about how for 18 years I've put a roof over the head of someone else's mistake." The words landed like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this sentiment before, but always behind closed doors, in bitter arguments between Richard and my mom when they thought I couldn't hear. Never in front of others. Never so nakedly cruel. "That's enough," my mother said, setting the cake down on the coffee table with shaking hands. "No, Laura, it's not enough. It's never been enough." Richard's voice rose. 18 years of pretending. 18 years of paying for another man's kid. And I'm done. He turned to face me directly, his eyes cold. "You've never been my son. You know it. I know it. Hell, everyone in this room knows it. And now that you're 18, you're no longer my legal responsibility." My heart hammered against my ribs. The living room felt suddenly too small, the air too thick. "Richard, stop this right now." My mother's voice cracked. But Richard was already walking toward the hall closet. He yanked it open and pulled out a large black trash bag. With deliberate steps, he moved to the staircase and shouted up toward my bedroom. "I've packed most of your crap already. Whatever doesn't fit in here," he tossed the trash bag at my feet, "isn't worth taking anyway." My friends sat in horrified silence. The candles on my cake continued to burn, blue wax dripping onto the chocolate frosting. "You can't do this," my mother finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. It held the familiar tremor of someone who had fought this battle too many times and lost. "Actually, I can. My house, my rules. And rule number 1 is that now that he's 18, he's out." Richard turned back to me. "You've got 10 minutes to grab whatever else you need and leave." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something more, to fight for me. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she remained frozen, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her silence was a betrayal more profound than Richard's words could ever be. Aisha stood up first. "This is messed up, Mr. Marlowe. You can't just throw him out." "Stay out of this," Richard snapped. Marcus grabbed my arm. "Come on, Lucas. Let's go upstairs and get your stuff. You can stay with me tonight." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. The walk up the stairs to my bedroom felt like climbing a mountain. My legs were led, my mind blank with shock. My room had already been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, closet emptied. Richard had been planning this, waiting for this day. My 18th birthday wasn't a celebration. It was an expiration date. "What a psycho," Trey muttered, helping me gather what remained of my belongings. "Marcus, pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my parents. They'll let you stay as long as you need." I barely heard him. My eyes had landed on the one thing Richard hadn't touched, a small wooden box my Uncle Thomas had given me on my 10th birthday. I picked it up, fingers tracing the carved initials on top, L.M. Lucas Marlowe. Except Marlowe wasn't my biological father's name. It was Richard's. A name I carried but had never truly owned. Inside the box was the only photo I had of myself as a baby, before Richard came into our lives. My mother, much younger, holding me in a hospital blanket. The photo was creased from being handled so often, but it was my only connection to a time when I might have been wanted. "Lucas," Marcus said softly, "we need to go. He's serious." I shoved the photo in my pocket and grabbed what I could. Clothes, my laptop, a few books, everything I owned. Everything that defined 18 years of existence, reduced to what would fit in a trash bag. Downstairs, Richard stood by the front door, holding it open. The rain poured in, creating a puddle on the entryway floor. My mother had disappeared completely. "Time's up," Richard said. My friends formed a protective circle around me as we walked toward the door. The cake sat abandoned on the coffee table, 18 candles still burning. "This isn't right," Aisha said again, her voice breaking. Richard's face remained impassive. "Life isn't right, sweetheart. Best he learns that now." As I stepped over the threshold into the pouring rain, I looked back one last time, hoping to see my mother, to hear her voice, to witness any sign that she would choose me over her own comfort and security. The house remained silent, and with that silence, something in me hardened, crystallized into resolve. "Let's go," I said to my friends, turning away from the only home I'd ever known. The rain soaked through my clothes instantly as we reached the sidewalk. Lightning split the sky, followed by a crash of thunder that seemed to shake the ground beneath my feet. "My dad's on his way," Marcus said, holding his jacket over his phone to keep it dry. 10 minutes, tops. I nodded, but a strange calm had settled over me. The kind that comes when you realize you've finally lost everything you were afraid of losing. There was a certain freedom in it. "Actually," I said, "I think I need a minute alone to process." "Lucas, no," Aisha started. "It's okay. I'm okay," I assured them, though I was anything but. "Marcus's house is just a few blocks. I'll meet you there." After some protest, they reluctantly agreed, making me promise to come straight to Marcus's house. I watched them run toward Trey's car, parked down the street, my trash bag of belongings tucked securely in the back seat. And then I was truly alone, standing in the rain, on my 18th birthday, with nowhere to go. The rain showed no mercy. I stood on the sidewalk, watching as Trey's car disappeared around the corner, its red taillights blurring through the downpour. Water streamed down my face, my hair plastered to my forehead, my t-shirt clinging to my skin like a second layer. I should have felt cold. Instead, I felt numb. Behind me, through the living room window, I could see shadows moving. Richard, pacing. I imagined him triumphant, finally free of the burden he'd never wanted. I wondered if my mother was crying, or if she too felt relief that she no longer had to navigate the treacherous waters between her husband and her son. It had always been like this, Richard's resentment growing with each passing year, my mother's spine gradually softening until she became a shadow of the woman in that hospital photo. For years, I'd tried to be invisible, to take up less space, to need less, but no matter how small I made myself, I was always too much for Richard to bear. I began walking with no destination in mind. The streets of our Dallas suburb were empty, everyone sensible taking shelter from the storm. Water sloshed in my sneakers with each step, but I barely noticed. My mind replayed the scene in the living room over and over. The way Richard's voice had cut through the birthday song, the way my mother's face had crumpled, the pity in my friend's eyes. The humiliation burned hotter than any physical discomfort. A memory surfaced. I must have been 7 or 8, drawing a picture of what I thought my real father might look like. I'd given him my eyes, my smile. When I showed it to my mother, asking if it looked like him, she'd quickly tucked it away. "We don't talk about that, Lucas," she'd said. "Richard is your father now." Except Richard had never been my father. He'd made that abundantly clear from the day he married my mother when I was 4 years old. Lightning flashed again, briefly, illuminating the deserted street ahead. In that flash, I caught sight of something unusual. A long black car parked at the curb about half a block away. As I drew closer, I realized it was a limousine. sleek and out of place in our middle-class neighborhood. I slowed my pace, curiosity momentarily overriding my misery. The windows were tinted, revealing nothing of who might be inside. As I approached, the rear window hummed softly as it lowered halfway. "Terrible night to be caught in the rain," a voice said from within. I stopped, suddenly wary. The voice belonged to a man, though I couldn't make out his features in the darkness of the car's interior. "I'm fine," I replied automatically, ready to continue walking. "Are you Lucas Marlowe?" The question froze me in place. My heart, which had been beating a steady rhythm of dull pain, suddenly kicked into high gear. "Who's asking?" I managed, taking a step back. The front door of the limousine opened, and the driver stepped out, unfurling a large black umbrella. He walked around to where I stood, offering shelter from the downpour. In his early 50s, perhaps, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, he didn't look threatening. But then I wasn't sure what threatening was supposed to look like. "My name is Julian," he said, "and I've been looking for you for quite some time." "Looking for me?" I repeated, not stepping under the umbrella. "Why?" Julian's expression softened. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation out of the rain. I have something for you." Every warning bell in my head was ringing. Strange man. Expensive car. My name. It didn't add up. And yet, what did I have to lose? My home was behind me. My possessions in a trash bag in Trey's car. My dignity somewhere back in that living room with 18 melting candles. "I'm not getting in a car with someone I don't know," I said, summoning what little common sense remained. Julian nodded as if he'd expected this response. Very sensible. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. From your father." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "My father?" "Yes, Mr. Donovan has been trying to reach you for many years. Now that you're 18, there are no legal barriers preventing contact." I stared at the envelope Julian was holding out. The paper was thick, expensive-looking, with my name written, in bold, flowing script across the front. "This is some kind of joke," I said, my voice hollow. "My father left before I was born. He didn't want anything to do with me." Julian's expression remained calm, but something like sorrow flickered in his eyes. "That's not accurate, Lucas. Your father has spent the last 18 years searching for you. He never stopped wanting to be in your life." Psyche. Rain continued to pour around us, but I barely felt it anymore. My focus had narrowed to the envelope in Julian's hand. "Take it," he urged gently. "Read it. If you decide you want nothing to do with Kieran Donovan afterward, he'll respect your wishes. But he asks that you at least hear his side of the story." With trembling fingers, I took the envelope. It felt heavy, substantial, real. "Who is Kieran Donovan?" The name felt foreign on my tongue. "He's a businessman here in Dallas, and he's your biological father." I tore open the envelope, no longer caring about caution. Inside was a single page of letterhead stationery, the name Donovan Enterprises embossed at the top. My eyes raced over the handwritten words. "Lucas, not a day has passed where I haven't thought of you. Searched for you, fought for you. You were taken from me, but you were never unwanted. You were never forgotten. You are my son. If you're reading this, it means you finally turned 18, and the legal barriers that have kept us apart no longer apply. I know you must have questions. I know you've probably been told lies about me. All I ask is a chance to tell you the truth. Julian will bring you to me, if you're willing. Whatever you decide, know this. You have always been loved. You have always been wanted. You have always been my greatest pride. Your father, Kieran." My hands shook so violently that the paper crinkled in my grip. 18 years of believing I had been abandoned, unwanted. 18 years of accepting Richard's contempt as something I deserved. 18 years of questions without answers. "This can't be real," I whispered. "It is," Julian said quietly. "Mr. Donovan can explain everything. He's waiting for you now, at his home." I looked back in the direction of the house where I'd grown up, the house I'd just been thrown out of. In my mind, I saw my mother's silence, her failure to stand up for me when it mattered most. I thought of Marcus and his parents, who would take me in out of pity. I thought of the trash bag containing my life's possessions, and then I thought of the man who claimed to be my father, who claimed to have been searching for me, who claimed I had been wanted all along. "What if this is some kind of trick?" I asked, the words barely audible over the rain. Julian's response was simple. "What do you have to lose by finding out?" "Nothing." I had nothing to lose. "Okay," I said, taking a step toward the limousine. "Take me to him. Julian opened the rear door, and I slid into the leather interior, the warmth enveloping me after the cold rain. As the door closed behind me, I realized I was crossing a threshold far more significant than the one I'd crossed when Richard threw me out. That had been an ending. This felt like a beginning. The limousine pulled away from the curb, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. Through the window, I watched my neighborhood, the only world I'd ever known, fade into the rainy darkness behind us. In my hand, I still clutched the letter. Your father, Kieran. I had no idea what waited for me at the end of this ride. Truth or deception, acceptance or further rejection. All I knew was that I was moving towards something rather than away. And for the first time that night, the numbness began to recede, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. The limousine glided through the rain-slicked streets of Dallas, each mile taking me further from everything familiar and closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Julian drove in silence, respecting my need to process. I stared at the letter in my hands, reading and rereading the words until they blurred before my eyes. You were taken from me, but you were never unwanted. Taken, not abandoned. The distinction hammered at 18 years of assumptions. As we left the working-class neighborhoods behind, the streets widened, the houses grew larger, set back behind manicured lawns and iron gates. Eventually, we turned onto a private drive lined with oak trees, their massive branches creating a canopy above us. At the end of the drive stood a house, no, a mansion, its stone facade illuminated by subtle landscape lighting despite the storm. We're here, Julian announced, bringing the car to a stop under a covered entrance. My heart thundered in my chest. I can't do this, I whispered, suddenly paralyzed with fear. Julian turned to look at me, his eyes kind. He's just as nervous as you are, Lucas. Perhaps more so. I couldn't imagine a man who owned a place like this being nervous about anything, let alone meeting me, a soaking wet teenager with nothing to his name but a letter clutched in trembling hands. Before I could respond, the massive front door opened, spilling warm light onto the steps. A silhouette appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, and then stepped forward into the light. And I saw my own face looking back at me. Not exactly, of course. This man was older, with streaks of silver at his temples. Lines creased the corners of his eyes. But the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head slightly tilted to one side, it was like looking at an older version of myself. Julian opened my door. It's all right, he said softly. Go on. My legs felt like lead as I stepped out of the car. The rain had eased to a gentle mist, but I was already soaked through. I stood there, dripping on imported stone, staring at the man who claimed to be my father. Lucas. His voice was deep, with a slight catch in it. You've grown so much. The implication that he'd seen me before hung in the air between us. I didn't move closer. How do I know you're really my father? I asked, my voice sounding younger than I wanted it to. A sad smile crossed his face. You look exactly like I did at 18, but I understand your caution. He gestured to the open door. Come inside. Get dry. We can talk, and I'll show you all the proof you need. Still hesitant, I followed him into the house. The entryway opened into a soaring foyer with a grand staircase and marble floors. Despite its size, the house felt lived in, warm. Art on the walls, books on shelves, a jacket tossed over a chair. Not a museum, but a home. The guest bathroom is through there, he said, pointing to a door off the main hall. There are towels, and I've put out some dry clothes that should fit you. When you're ready, I'll be in the study. I nodded, still unable to form proper sentences. The bathroom was bigger than my bedroom at Richard's house, with heated floors and fluffy towels that felt like clouds. The clothes laid out, jeans, a soft gray sweater, fit perfectly, as if they'd been purchased specifically for me, which I realized with a jolt, they probably had been. When I emerged, feeling slightly more human, I followed the sound of a crackling fire to what must have been the study. Kieran Donovan stood by a wall of windows, looking out at the stormy night, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He turned when I entered. Better? He asked. I nodded. Thanks for the clothes. An awkward silence stretched between us. 18 years of absence condensed into an unbridgeable gap. You must have questions, he finally said. About 1 million, I admitted. I don't even know where to start. Kieran gestured to one of 2 leather chairs positioned before the fireplace. Sit, please. I perched on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt if necessary. Kieran took the seat across from me, setting his drink aside. First, I want you to know that everything you've probably been told about me is a lie, he began. I never abandoned you or your mother. I never stopped fighting to be in your life. Then where were you? The question burst from me with more force than I intended. Where were you for 18 years? Pain flashed across his face, fighting a losing legal battle against a man with connections I couldn't match. Richard Marlowe came from a family with significant influence in the judicial system in this county. When he wanted something, he got it, and he wanted your mother. I shook my head, trying to process. My mother wouldn't just... Laura was very young when we met, Kieran continued, 21 to my 32. We fell in love quickly, and when she got pregnant, I was overjoyed. But her family disapproved of me. They thought I was too old, too focused on building my business. They wanted her to marry someone from their social circle. He picked up his drink, swirled the liquid. Richard had been pursuing Laura for years. When she chose me instead, he didn't take it well. After you were born, he saw his opportunity. He convinced her family that I was unstable, unfit to be a father. He used his connections to paint me as a danger to you. Both. My mind flashed to Richard's temper, his controlling nature, the fear that sometimes showed in my mother's eyes when he raised his voice. That sounds more like him than you, I said quietly. Kieran nodded. Projection. Accusing others of your own worst traits. He set the glass down again, untouched. By the time you were 6 months old, he had manufactured enough evidence to convince a judge to grant a temporary restraining order against me. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of you or your mother. And she just went along with this? The betrayal felt fresh, raw. Laura was young, scared, and alone. Her family had sided with Richard. I was fighting the legal battle, but in the meantime, she had a baby to care for and no support system. His voice held no bitterness, only a deep sadness. Richard offered security, stability. He promised to adopt you, to give you his name. But he didn't want me, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. He made that clear every day of my life. Anger flashed in Kieran's eyes, the first strong emotion I'd seen from him. I know. Julian has been keeping an eye on you for years. He reported back. It took everything in me not to violate that. Restraining order when I heard how Richard treated you. You've been watching me? The thought was both unsettling and strangely comforting. As best I could. School plays from the back row. Baseball games from a parked car down the street. Glimpses. That's all I could have without risking Richard using it against me to make the separation permanent. He stood up suddenly, walked to a desk in the corner, and returned with a thick folder. This is every legal document from the past 18 years. Every appeal. Every petition for visitation rights. Every denial. Every investigator's report. I took the folder, opened it to see stacks of official papers, court seals, signatures. Dates that spanned my entire life. The evidence of a battle I never knew was being fought over me. The last appeal was denied 6 months ago, Kieran said. That's when I realized my only option was to wait until you turned 18, when no court could prevent me from contacting you directly. I closed the folder, overwhelmed. Why would Richard go to so much trouble to keep you away if he didn't even want me? Kieran's expression darkened. Because Richard Marlowe is a man who can't stand to lose. Anything or anyone he considers his, he keeps. Not out of love, but possession. He lost Laura to me once. Taking you from me was his revenge. The pieces were falling into place. Richard's resentment, my mother's fearful silence, the complete absence of information about my biological father throughout my childhood. And now? I asked, my voice small. What happens now? Kieran leaned forward, his, eyes, my eyes, fixed on mine. That depends entirely on you, Lucas. I've waited 18 years for the chance to know my son. But I won't force my way into your life. If you want me to drive you to your friend's house and never contact you again, I'll respect that choice. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This man had fought for me, searched for me, waited for me, and now he was giving me the choice he'd been denied for 18 years. I don't know what I want, I admitted. This is a lot to process. Of course it is, he said gently. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Stay here. There's a room prepared for you. Take some time. I should have been suspicious of his kindness, wary of his story, but sitting across from him, seeing my own features reflected in his face, feeling the weight of that folder in my hands, I found myself wanting to believe him. I'll stay, I said. At least for tonight. The relief that washed over his face was too genuine to fake. "Thank you," he said simply. "That's more than I dared hope for." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The bedroom Kieran had prepared for me was larger than the entire first floor of Richard's house, with a king-sized bed and windows that overlooked an illuminated swimming pool in the backyard. But the luxury wasn't what kept me awake. It was the photographs. They lined the dresser and desk. Pictures of me that I'd never seen before. Me at a Little League game, age 10, swinging a bat. Me at 12, in the school play where I'd had exactly 3 lines. Me at 16, at a track meet where I'd finished dead last, but had kept running anyway. Moments of my life, captured from a distance by a father I never knew I had. I picked up one frame, a photo of a much younger Kieran holding a newborn wrapped in a blue hospital blanket. My birthday. His smile was radiant, his eyes fixed on the tiny face peering up at him. A father looking at his son with pure love. The contrast with Richard's perpetual scowl was so stark it made my chest ache. By morning, exhaustion had dulled my skepticism. I showered in the ensuite bathroom with its rainfall showerhead and marble tiles, put on another set of new clothes laid out for me, and made my way downstairs, following the smell of coffee. I found Kieran in the kitchen, making breakfast. Not a chef or housekeeper, but him personally, whisking. Eggs in a bowl. He looked up when I entered, his face brightening. "You're up. I wasn't sure if you'd sleep in after everything yesterday." He gestured to the coffee maker. "Help yourself, or there's juice in the fridge." The normalcy of the moment was disorienting. Yesterday I'd been kicked out of my home. Now I was standing in a mansion watching a wealthy stranger who claimed to be my father. "Make me breakfast." "Did you sleep at all?" Kieran asked, noting my hesitation. "Not really," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "I had a lot to think about." Kieran nodded, returning to his cooking. "I've taken the day off work. I thought we could talk more if you're up for it. Or if you need space, the house is yours to explore. There's a gym, a pool, a theater room. I should probably let my friends know I'm okay," I said. "They'll be worried." "Of course. There's a landline in the study, or you can use my cell." I took the offered phone and stepped out onto the patio to call Marcus. His mother answered, her voice tense with concern. "Lucas, are you all right?" "Marcus told us what happened. We've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mrs. Davis. Something unexpected came up. I'm safe." "Where are you? Do you need a ride?" I looked back at the house, at Kieran moving around the kitchen. "I'm with my biological father, actually. It's a long story." There was a pause. "Your biological father? Lucas, are you sure you know what you're doing?" The concern in her voice was genuine, and I appreciated it. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I might be exactly where I was supposed to be. "I'm being careful," I assured her. "Can you tell Marcus I'll call him later with details?" After hanging up, I returned to the kitchen, where Kieran was plating eggs, bacon, and toast. We ate at the island, the silence between us less tense than the night before. "Your mother," Kieran said suddenly. "How is she?" The question caught me off guard. "She's quiet, smaller than she used to be." I pushed eggs around my plate. "Richard isn't an easy person to live with." Kieran's jaw tightened. "No, I imagine he's not. Why did she choose him?" The question had been burning in me all night. If she loved you, why would she go to him? Kieran set down his fork. "Fear is a powerful motivator, Lucas. Richard made her afraid, of being alone, of losing custody of you, of what he might do if she refused him. And over time, fear can reshape a person until they can't remember who they were before it." I thought about my mother's downcast eyes, her nervous habits, the way she'd flinch when Richard raised his voice. The portrait Kieran painted fit too well to dismiss. "I don't blame her," Kieran continued. "I blame myself for not fighting harder, for not finding a way around the legal barriers Richard constructed." "You have the folder full of proof that you tried," I reminded him. A sad smile crossed his face. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. After breakfast, Kieran gave me a tour of the house. 12,000 square feet of space that somehow managed to feel like a home rather than a showpiece. His study walls were lined with engineering books and business journals. The living room shelves held well-worn novels and history texts. In the basement was a workshop where he built furniture as a hobby. "My grandfather was a carpenter," he explained, running a hand over a half-finished table. "He taught me that there's honor in creating something with your own hands." Upstairs, he showed me a room I hadn't noticed the night before, a bedroom that had clearly been designed for a child, with model airplanes hanging from the ceiling and shelves filled with books and toys. I built this room when you were 2, Kieran said, his voice soft. I kept updating it as you grew older, hoping that someday— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The room was a physical manifestation of his hope, his waiting, his refusal to give up on having his son in his life. Julian would tell me the things you were interested in, he continued. When he mentioned you liked astronomy, I got the telescope. He pointed to a professional-grade telescope by the window. When you joined the track team, I had the treadmill installed. Each object in the room represented a milestone in my life that Kieran had observed from a distance. The care, the attention to detail. It was overwhelming. I don't understand, I said, turning to face him. You're clearly successful. You have resources, connections. How could Richard have kept you away all these years? Kieran's expression darkened. Money isn't everything, Lucas. Richard's family has deep roots in Dallas law enforcement and the local judiciary. His uncle was a judge. His brother-in-law is a captain in the police department. Every time I made progress legally, a new obstacle would appear. A judge would recuse themselves. Paperwork would go missing. Hearings would be postponed. That's corruption, I said, anger flaring. Yes, Kieran agreed, but proving it was impossible without putting you and your mother at risk. Richard made it clear that if I pushed too hard, he would take it. Out on both of you. The pieces were falling into place. The way my mother would tense whenever Richard's family came to visit. The whispered phone calls she'd take in the bathroom with the water running to mask her voice. The unexplained bruises she'd occasionally try to hide with long sleeves even in summer. He hurt her, didn't he? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Kieran's silence was confirmation enough. Why didn't she leave him? My voice cracked with the weight of years of witnessing my mother's quiet suffering. The same reason many people stay in abusive situations, Kieran said gently. Fear, manipulation, the gradual erosion of self-worth until you believe you have no options. He ran a hand through his hair. I tried to provide her a way out, through Julian. Multiple times. She always refused. I thought about all the times I'd begged my mother to stand up to Richard, to defend me, to defend herself. Her tearful responses always circled back to the same theme. It's more complicated than you understand, Lucas. She'd been right. It was more complicated. A web of power, control, and fear that had ensnared us all for 18 years. By late afternoon, rain clouds had given way to golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Kieran's home. We sat on the terrace overlooking the pool, the air between us gradually becoming more comfortable as hours of conversation filled in the vast gaps of our shared history. What about your family? I asked. Do I have grandparents? Aunts? Uncles? A shadow crossed Kieran's face. My parents passed away before you were born. My father had a heart attack when I was in college, and my mother followed a few years later. Cancer. He took a sip of his iced tea. I was an only child, like you. But there are distant cousins in Boston I see occasionally. So it's just you, I said, suddenly understanding the emptiness I'd sensed beneath the grandeur of the house. In all this space. It was, he agreed, his eyes meeting mine. Until now. The implication hung in the air between us. An invitation, a possibility. A door opening to a future I hadn't dared imagine yesterday. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Marcus asking if I was okay, where I was, what was happening. I'd been so absorbed in Kieran's world that I'd forgotten to call him back. I should probably check in with my friends, I said, standing up, and figure out what I'm going to do about my stuff. Most of my belongings were still in the trash bag in Trey's car, including my laptop and school textbooks. Of course, Kieran said. Use the study for privacy. And Lucas, he hesitated, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want. Tonight, a week, indefinitely. This house has always been meant to be your home too. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. In the study, I called Marcus and gave him a condensed version of what had happened. The limousine, Kieran, the revelation that my biological father had been searching for me all these years. Dude, Marcus breathed when I finished. That's insane. Like, movie-level insane. I know, I agreed. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So this guy is for real? Not some creep? I glanced around the study at the photographs on the desk. Younger versions of Kieran at MIT graduation, breaking ground on his first building project, receiving awards. A life documented in images, with one glaring absence. Me. He's for real, I said. He has proof, documents, photos, Everything. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. It was the question I'd been avoiding all day. What was I going to do? Go back to school on Monday as if nothing had changed? Return to Richard's house and beg for forgiveness? Accept Kieran's offer and start a new life in this mansion with a father I was just beginning to know? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm safe. I promise. After hanging up, I sent quick texts to Aisha and Trey, assuring them I was okay and would explain everything soon. Then I sat at Kieran's desk, running my fingers over the polished wood, trying to imagine a future where I belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. A folder on the desk caught my eye. Cream-colored, unmarked, different from the legal documents Kieran had shown me earlier. Curiosity getting the better of me, I opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of Richard. Recent ones, based on his appearance. Richard entering a building I didn't recognize. Richard with a woman who wasn't my mother, his hand on the small of her back. Richard at what appeared to be a bank, signing documents. I see you found my current investigation. I jumped at Kieran's voice from the doorway. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. It's all right, he said, coming into the room. I have no secrets from you, Lucas. That's the difference between Richard and me. What is this? I asked, gesturing to the photos. Kieran sat on the edge of the desk. About 6 months ago, Julian observed Richard making regular visits to an apartment in South Dallas. Further investigation revealed he's been having an affair for at least 2 years. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me. Richard had never shown my mother much affection or respect, but somehow it still did. Does Mom know? I don't believe so. But that's not all. Kieran pulled out another document from the folder. Richard's company is failing. He's been embezzling from client accounts to maintain appearances. The FBI has been building a case against him for nearly a year. My mind reeled. Richard, who had lorded his success over me my entire life, who had used his financial support as a weapon to keep my mother in line, was a fraud. How do you know all this? I asked. I have contacts in the financial industry. When I heard rumors about Richard's company, I hired private investigators to look deeper. Kieran's expression was grim. I wanted to know what kind of man was raising my son. The implications began to dawn on me. So Richard is going to prison? Most likely. The evidence is substantial. It's just a matter of time before arrests are made. And my mother? What happens to her? Kieran's expression softened. That depends on what she knew. If she was complicit, she could face charges too. If she was in the dark, which I suspect she was, she'll be left with nothing. The house, cars, bank accounts, everything will be seized or frozen during the investigation. The thought of my mother alone, destitute, sent a chill through me despite the warm evening. For all her failings, all her silences when I needed her to speak up, she was still my mother. We have to warn her, I said, standing up. Kieran's eyebrows rose. Lucas, after what happened last night? I know. I cut him off. But she doesn't deserve to be blindsided by this. She deserves a chance to get out before everything falls apart. A long moment passed as Kieran studied my face. Then he nodded slowly. You have your mother's compassion. It was one of the things I loved most about her. He reached for his phone. I'll have Julian bring the car around. The drive back to the only neighborhood I'd ever called home felt surreal. The modest houses, the familiar streets, everything looked smaller, shabbier than I remembered, though nothing had changed but my perspective. When we pulled up across the street from Richard's house, I saw my mother's car in the driveway. Richard's was gone. Do you want me to come with you? Kieran asked as Julian brought the limousine to a stop. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. I understand. He squeezed my shoulder. I'll be right here if you need me. The walk to the front door felt longer than it ever had before. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a symbolic acknowledgement that this was no longer my home. When my mother opened the door, her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of 18 years of unspoken truths hanging between us. Lucas, she finally whispered, you came back. Not to stay, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We need to talk. She stepped back to let me in, her gaze darting past me to the limousine parked across the street. I saw the moment recognition dawned in her eyes. Kieran? She breathed, her hand going to her throat. He found me, I said simply. Or rather, he never lost me. Not like you told me. We moved to the living room, the scene of last night's humiliation now eerily quiet. All evidence of my birthday party cleared away as if it had never happened. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I know about Richard, I continued when she didn't speak. The affair, the embezzlement, the FBI investigation. All of it. Her face crumpled. How? Kieran told me. He's been watching Richard for months. I sat across from her, maintaining a deliberate distance. The question is, did you know? Tears spilled down her cheeks. About the business problems, yes. Richard's been stressed, drinking more. But the affair? The investigation? She shook her head. No, I believed her. My mother had many flaws, but dishonesty wasn't one of them. Her sin had always been silence, not lies. You need to leave him, Mom, now, before everything falls apart and you go down with him. She laughed bitterly. And go where, Lucas? With what money? Richard controls everything. Kieran will help you, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully formed the thought. But as I spoke them, I knew they were true. My mother's eyes widened. After everything, after what I did, he would help me? He still cares about what happens to you. I leaned forward. Mom, I know about the restraining order. I know how Richard used his connections to keep Kieran away from me. I know you were scared. Fresh tears streaked her face. I was so young, Lucas. So alone. Richard promised to take care of us. Both. And instead, he made our lives hell. I finished for her. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. Pack a bag, I said, standing up. Right now, you can come with me to Kieran's, at least until you figure out what to do next. I can't just leave, my mother protested, though she had already half risen from the sofa. Richard will be home soon. He'll be furious. That's exactly why we need to go now, I insisted. If he's about to be arrested, who knows what he might do? The fear that flashed across her face told me she knew exactly what Richard might do if cornered. It was a fear I'd seen too many times over the years. When dinner wasn't ready on time, when bills were higher than expected, when I'd done something to disappoint him yet again. Lucas, she began, tears threatening. Again, I'm so sorry about last night. I should have stopped him. I should have said something. Yes, I agreed, unable to soften the truth. You should have, but that's not what matters right now. What matters is getting you out of here safely. She nodded, the last of her resistance crumbling. Give me 10 minutes. While she packed upstairs, I wandered through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The faded curtains my mother had sewn herself because Richard refused to pay for new ones. The worn carpet he'd promised to replace for years. The family photos on the wall, all carefully arranged to project an image of happiness that had never existed. I paused at one, me, at 14, standing between my mother and Richard at a school award ceremony. Richard's hand gripped my shoulder, his smile tight and forced. My own expression was guarded, cautious. Only my mother's smile seemed genuine, her pride in my academic achievement momentarily overcoming her fear of Richard's disapproval. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway yanked me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Richard's BMW coming to a stop behind my mother's sedan. Mom, I called up the stairs. Richard's home. We need to go now. I'm almost ready, she called back, panic edging her voice. The front door opened before I could move, and Richard stepped inside. He froze when he saw me, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and then a cold mask of control. Well, he said, closing the door behind him. The prodigal son returns. I'm not staying, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I just came to get Mom. Richard's eyebrows rose. Your mother isn't going anywhere. Yes, she is. I stood my ground, staring directly into the eyes of the man who had terrorized me for as long as I could remember. We know about the affair, Richard, and the embezzlement, and the FBI investigation. The color drained from his face. For a split second, genuine fear replaced his usual arrogance. Then his expression hardened. I don't know what you think you know, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. But your mother isn't leaving this house. Yes, I am. We both turned to see my mother at the foot of the stairs, a small suitcase in her hand. She looked terrified but determined, her chin lifted in a show of defiance I'd rarely witnessed. Laura, Richard's tone shifted to the manipulative gentleness he used when he wanted to control her. You're upset about last night. I understand. But Lucas is an adult now. It's time for us to focus on our life together. My mother's laugh was brittle. What life together, Richard? The one where you're sleeping with another woman? Or the one where you're stealing from your clients? Richard's mask slipped. Rage contorted his features as he took a step toward her. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you, don't. I stepped between them, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Don't take another step. Richard's attention swung to me, his eyes narrowing. This isn't your house anymore, boy. You have no say in what happens here. You're right, I agreed. It's not my house. It never felt like my home. I pulled out my phone. But I do have Kieran Donovan's private number, and he's sitting in a car across the street with his driver, who happens to be an ex-Marine. Richard's face went slack with shock. Donovan? My real father, I confirmed. The one you kept me from for 18 years through lies and legal manipulation. A new emotion crossed Richard's face. Calculation. I could almost see the gears turning as he assessed this unexpected development. So that's where you've been, he said slowly. With Donovan. A cruel smile twisted his lips. Did he fill your head with lies about me? About why he wasn't in your life? He showed me court documents, restraining orders, evidence of how your family used their connections to keep him away. I took a step closer to Richard, no longer afraid. He showed me photos of myself growing up, moments he captured from a distance because it was the closest you would let him get to me. Something ugly flickered in Richard's eyes. Kieran Donovan was obsessed with your mother. When she chose me instead, he couldn't accept it. He's dangerous, delusional. He's right outside. I cut him off. Why don't you tell him that to his face? Richard's gaze darted to the window, then back to me. You're making a mistake, Lucas. Donovan isn't the saint he's pretending to be. Maybe not, I conceded. But he's the father who wanted me, who searched for me, who waited for me. I glanced at my mother, who stood frozen, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. And right now, he's offering Mom a safe place to stay until the FBI finishes their investigation into your company. The mention of the FBI drained the remaining color from Richard's face. His hand shot out, gripping my mother's arm with enough force to make her wince. You're not going anywhere, he hissed. Either of you. Before I could react, the front door opened. Kieran stood in the doorway, Julian a step behind him. Take your hand off her, Marlowe, Kieran said, his voice deadly calm. Richard released my mother's arm but didn't back down. This is my house. You're trespassing. Actually, Julian spoke up, we were invited by Lucas, and given that you publicly disowned him and threw him out last night, I'd say your claim to parental authority is questionable at best. Richard's face contorted with rage. You've always wanted to steal them from me, Donovan, from the beginning. This was your plan all along, turn my own family against me. I didn't have to turn anyone against you, Kieran replied evenly. You managed that all on your own. He turned to my mother. Laura, it's good to see you despite the circumstances. Lucas says you need a place to stay. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her child. Kieran, I'm so sorry for everything. We can talk about that later, he said gently. Right now, let's get you both out of here. Richard stepped forward, fists clenched. She's not going anywhere with you. Julian moved with surprising speed for a man his age, positioning himself between Richard and the rest of us. Mr. Marlowe, I strongly suggest you reconsider your next action. For a tense moment, I thought Richard would attack anyway. Then slowly, his posture changed. The rage didn't disappear, but it cooled into something more calculated, more controlled. Fine, he said, his voice tight. Go, all of you. But Laura, he turned to my mother, when you realize what a mistake you're making, don't expect to come crawling back. And don't expect to take, anything with you beyond what's in that pathetic little suitcase. My mother straightened her spine, a flicker of her old strength returning. The only mistake I made, Richard, was not leaving years ago. We walked out together. My mother, Kieran, Julian, and me, leaving Richard standing in the doorway of the house that had never truly been a home. As we crossed the street to the waiting limousine, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. An ending and a beginning, all rolled into one moment. In the car, my mother sat beside me, her hand finding mine and squeezing it tightly. Across from us, Kieran watched with an unreadable expression. Thank you, my mother whispered to him. I know you have no reason to help me after what I did. Kieran's gaze softened. Laura, whatever happened between us is in the past. What matters now is keeping both of you safe. As the limousine pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. Richard still stood in the doorway watching us leave. Even from a distance, I could feel the cold fury in his stare. He won't let this go, I said quietly. He'll try to hurt us somehow. Let him try, Kieran replied, his voice steady and sure. This Time? I'm ready for him. 3 days. That's how long it took for Richard's carefully constructed world to unravel completely. We watched it happen from the safety of Kieran's home, where my mother and I had settled into a strange new reality. She took one of the guest rooms, spending most of her time alone, processing 18 years of decisions and their consequences. I divided my time between exploring my new surroundings and getting to know the father I'd been denied. On the morning of the third day, Julian entered the breakfast room where Kieran and I were discussing my college options, suddenly expanded now that finances were no longer an obstacle. "It's happening," Julian said simply, placing a tablet on the table between us. The screen showed a live news broadcast. Police cars surrounded Richard's financial firm downtown, officers leading people out in handcuffs. The headline scrolled across the bottom: "Massive fraud uncovered at Marlowe Financial. CEO and top executives arrested." My mother entered just as the camera zoomed in on Richard, stone-faced and rigid as officers guided him toward a waiting police car. She sank into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. "Are you okay?" I asked her, reaching for her hand. She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the screen. "I think I've been waiting for this day for a long time, without allowing myself to believe it would ever come." The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Sources close to the investigation suggest that Marlowe Financial has been operating a complex Ponzi scheme for at least 5 years, defrauding investors of an estimated $30 million. The FBI has been building a case for nearly a year following an anonymous tip from within the company." Kieran muted the television. "Laura, you should know that none of this was my doing. The investigation was already well underway before I learned about it." My mother nodded again. "I believe you." She finally tore her gaze from the screen to look at him directly. "You were always the honest one, Kieran. That's why Richard hated you so much. Your integrity highlighted everything he lacked." Later that day, as the full extent of Richard's crimes dominated the news cycle, reporters began to gather outside Kieran's gate. Someone had made the connection. The disgraced financial executive's stepson was now living with Kieran Donovan, the respected architectural engineer and business owner. "They're going to want statements," Julian advised, watching the growing media presence from a security monitor. "From all of you. We don't owe them anything," I said, protective instincts flaring. Kieran considered this, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. "Actually, this might be an opportunity." "For what?" my mother asked. "To reclaim your narrative," Kieran replied. "Both of you have been silenced for years. Laura by Richard's manipulation, and Lucas by circumstances beyond his control. Maybe it's time your voices were heard." That evening, Kieran arranged for a single reporter, a woman he trusted from previous business profiles, to come to the house for an exclusive interview. Emily Chen from the Dallas Morning News arrived with just a photographer, her manner professional but kind as she set up in Kieran's living room. "I want to be clear about the parameters," Kieran began. "This story is about family reunited, not just Richard's crimes. And Laura and Lucas have final approval on what gets published." Emily nodded. "Understood. And I appreciate the exclusive. Every outlet in town is trying to connect these dots." For the next 2 hours, we told our story. My mother spoke first, her voice gaining strength as she described meeting Kieran, falling in love, having me, and then the gradual way Richard had inserted himself into her life during a vulnerable time. "He presented himself as a savior," she explained, her hands steady now. "He convinced my family that Kieran was unstable, dangerous. When you hear something enough times from people you trust, you start to believe it." "And the restraining order?" Emily asked. "Based on fabricated evidence," Kieran interjected. "Richard's family had connections throughout the Dallas legal system. His uncle was a judge, his brother-in-law in law enforcement. They created a narrative about me that was nearly impossible to fight." I spoke next, describing my childhood with Richard. The constant reminders that I wasn't his son, wasn't wanted, wasn't good enough. The emotional abuse that had shaped my sense of self-worth. The birthday party that had ended with me standing in the rain with a trash bag of belongings. "And that's when Julian found you?" Emily confirmed, scribbling notes. "That's when Julian delivered the letter Kieran had been waiting. 18 years to give me," I corrected. "My father never stopped looking for me. Never stopped fighting for me. I just didn't know it until that night." The photographer captured images as we talked, the 3 of us together on the sofa. Kieran showing Emily the room he'd prepared for me over the years. My mother and I standing by the pool as sunset painted the water gold. When the interview concluded, Emily closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "This is going to be quite a story," she said. "The fall of Richard Marlowe is big news on its own, but this," she gestured to the three of us, "this is the human element that will resonate with people." After she left, we sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of having shared our truth settling around us. "Do you think it was a mistake?" my mother finally asked. "Making our private pain so public?" Kieran shook his head. "Secrets protected Richard for too long. The truth deserves its day in the light." The article ran 2 days later, front page of the Sunday edition. "Family reunited after 18 years. The true story behind the Marlowe financial scandal." The photograph showed Kieran and me side by side, our resemblance unmistakable, with my mother standing slightly apart, connected to us both but still finding her place in this new configuration. The phone calls started immediately. First my friends, Marcus, Aisha, and Trey, full of questions and support. Then my mother's sister, who had believed Richard's lies about Kieran and now called in tears, apologizing for her role in keeping us apart. Even my teachers reached out, suddenly understanding the quiet sadness they'd always sensed in me. The most surprising call came from Richard's secretary, Susan, who had worked for him for over a decade. "I was the anonymous tip," she told my mother, her voice low as if she still feared being overheard. "I found the evidence of what he was doing 2 years ago, but I was afraid to come forward. He had this way of making threats that sounded like casual observations. But after I saw how he treated Lucas at the company Christmas party last year, something in me snapped. No child should be spoken to that way." "Thank you," my mother whispered, "for being braver than I was." In the wake of the article, other stories emerged. Former employees spoke about Richard's bullying. Clients described his, intimidation tactics. The facade he'd maintained for so long crumbled completely, revealing the hollow man beneath. A week after his arrest, Richard was denied bail, deemed a flight risk due to the discovery of recently purchased plane tickets to countries without extradition treaties. He would remain in custody until his trial, which, given the complexity of his crimes, could be months or even years away. That night, I found my mother sitting alone on the terrace, staring out at the stars. I joined her, noting how the rigid tension she'd carried for as long as I could remember had begun to ease from her shoulders. "I keep waiting to feel guilty," she said without preamble, "for leaving him, for telling our story to the newspaper, for being relieved that he's in jail." She turned to look at me, her eyes clear. "But all I feel is free." I took her hand. "You deserve to be free, Mom." She squeezed my fingers. "So do you, Lucas. And I'm so sorry I didn't help you find your freedom sooner." Inside the house, I could see Kieran through the window, on the phone in his study. Watching him, his gestures, his mannerisms that I was beginning to recognize in myself, I felt a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before. "What happens now?" I asked. "For us?" My mother followed my gaze to where Kieran stood. "I don't know exactly, but for the first time in 18 years, I'm not afraid to find out." Summer faded into fall, bringing with it cooler temperatures and the rhythm of a new school year. I returned to my high school for my final semester, the stares and whispers of my classmates following me through the hallways. The story of Richard's arrest and my reunion with Kieran had made me an overnight celebrity of sorts. The boy who had been kicked out on his birthday only to discover his real father was waiting. Most people didn't know what to say to me. Some avoided me entirely, as if misfortune might be contagious. Others approached with a morbid fascination, hungry for details the newspaper hadn't provided. Only my true friends remained unchanged. Marcus still teased me about my terrible basketball skills. Aisha still argued with me about politics. Trey still shared his elaborate conspiracy theories during lunch. With them, I was still just Lucas. Not a victim, not a curiosity, just their friend who happened to be living a very different life now. "So your dad is like, rich," Trey observed one afternoon as the four of us sprawled on the bleachers after school. "Like private plane rich." "He doesn't have a private plane," I corrected, though I had learned that Kieran's success in architectural engineering had indeed made him wealthier than I'd initially realized. "But yeah, he's comfortable. And he's actually cool," Marcus pressed. "Not just, pretending to be cool to win you over." I thought about the previous weekend, when Kieran had taught me to change the oil in his vintage Mustang, his patience never wavering as I fumbled through the process. How he asked about my day every evening, genuinely interested in the mundane details of high school life. How he'd started helping me prepare for college applications, offering guidance, without pressure. "He's not trying to win me over," I said finally. "He's just being a dad." The dad he wanted to be 18 years ago. Aisha nudged my shoulder. And your mom? How's she doing with all this? That was more complicated. My mother had found a job as an office manager at a small law firm, insisting on her own income despite Kieran's assurances that she was welcome to stay at his home as long as needed. She'd also started therapy, working through the trauma of her years with Richard. Some days were better than others. She's finding her way, I said simply. It's a process. What I didn't say was how strange it was to witness my mother and Kieran navigating their shared past and uncertain present. They were unfailingly polite to each other, careful to respect boundaries, yet I sometimes caught them looking at each other when they thought no one was watching. A complex mixture of regret, nostalgia, and something I couldn't quite name passing between them. As for Richard, his trial was still months away, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His lawyer had already approached the prosecution about a plea deal, seeking to reduce a potential 30-year sentence to something more manageable. I didn't care about the details. Richard had become a shadow in my mind, still present but increasingly transparent, no longer solid enough to block the light. The days shortened as winter approached. College acceptance letters began to arrive. UCLA, Northwestern, Columbia, all offering generous scholarships based on my academic record. Kieran beamed with pride at each one, while insisting I choose based on my own preferences, not his. "It's your future, Lucas," he said as we reviewed the options spread across the kitchen island. "I missed 18 years of your life. I won't miss what comes next, regardless of where you decide to go." The promise warmed me more than the scholarship offers. To be wanted, to be chosen, to be claimed, it still felt like a miracle sometimes. In December, exactly 3 months after my 18th birthday, Kieran suggested a celebration. "Not a birthday redo," he clarified when I hesitated. "Just a gathering. Friends, family, a proper introduction to my world, if you're comfortable with that." I agreed, though the memory of my last celebration still stung. The guest list expanded beyond my small circle of friends to include Kieran's colleagues, business associates, and the distant cousins from Boston I'd heard about but not yet met. My mother agreed to attend, her nervousness evident in the 3 different outfits she tried on, before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. My eyes. The evening of the party arrived. The mansion transformed with subtle decorations that managed to be festive without referencing birthdays. I stood with Kieran at the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived, accepting congratulations for college acceptances, and navigating curious questions about my unusual circumstances with growing confidence. As the house filled with people, I found myself withdrawing to the terrace, needing a moment of quiet. The December night was crisp but not cold, stars visible through breaks in high, thin clouds. Behind me, the sounds of conversation and laughter spilled through the open doors. "Too much?" Kieran asked, joining me with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. I accepted one with a grateful smile. "A little, but in a good way." We stood in comfortable silence, sipping our drinks and looking out over the illuminated garden. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Kieran said finally. "The room upstairs, the one I prepared for you over the years. I've noticed you haven't moved your things in there." It was true. Since coming to live with Kieran, I'd been staying in one of the guest rooms, leaving the space he'd created for me untouched. It felt too perfect, I admitted. Like a museum of the childhood I didn't have with you. I didn't want to mess it up. Kieran's expression softened. "Lucas, that room was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be yours. Lived in, changed, adapted as you grew. The way it is now represents who I thought you might become. I'd much rather see who you actually are." The invitation to claim the space, to remake it in my own image, touched something deep inside me. "I'd like that," I said. "Maybe tomorrow. We could move some things around?" "I'd like that too." Kieran raised his glass in a small toast. "To new beginnings." We were interrupted by Julian, who appeared at the terrace door. "Mr. Donovan, there's someone here to see Lucas. She says she's expected, but she's not on the guest list." Before either of us could respond, a small figure darted past Julian onto the terrace. Mrs. Reynolds, my 11th grade English teacher, clutching a gift bag and looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the house. "Lucas!" she exclaimed. "I hope it's all right that I came. I got your invitation, but I wasn't sure if it was a mistake since we haven't had class together in over a year." "It wasn't a mistake," I assured her, genuinely pleased to see the teacher who had first recognized my writing talent and encouraged me to pursue it. "I wanted you to be here. Kieran extended his hand. I'm Kieran Donovan, Lucas's father. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Reynolds. Lucas has told me how influential you've been in his education. Mrs. Reynolds blushed, shaking his hand. Lucas always had the talent. I just gave him the space to develop it. She turned to me, holding out the gift bag. I brought you something, a graduation gift, I suppose, a bit early. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. For your future stories, she explained, whatever they may be. I hugged her, surprising us both with the gesture. Thank you. For everything. As the party continued, I found myself moving between worlds with increasing ease, introducing my high school friends to Kieran's colleagues, watching my mother engage in animated conversation with Mrs. Reynolds, observing Julian's patient explanations to Trey about the security systems that fascinated him. My past and present were converging, creating something new and unexpected, something whole. Later, as the last guest departed, I found myself alone in the study with my mother. She looked more relaxed than I had seen her in years, the haunted look in her eyes gradually being replaced by a quiet confidence. You seem happy, she observed. With Kieran, with all of this. I am, I admitted, which still feels strange sometimes, like I'm waiting for it to be taken away. She nodded in understanding. That's how trauma works. It teaches you to expect the worst, even when things are good. She reached for my hand. But Lucas, you deserve this. You deserve to be happy, to be valued, to be loved exactly as you are. So do you, I reminded her. A small smile curved her lips. I'm learning to believe that. We were joined by Kieran, who carried a small box. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, my mother said, rising. I should get going anyway, it's getting late. Actually, Laura, I was hoping you'd stay for this. Kieran set the box on the coffee table. There's something I've wanted to give Lucas, but it involves you too. Curious, I opened the box. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. My mother and Kieran in a hospital room, both looking exhausted but radiant. Between them, a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. Me, just hours old. The only photo of the three of us together, Kieran explained softly, taken before everything fell apart. My mother's breath caught as she looked at the image. I'd forgotten how young we were, how hopeful. I had it framed for your room, Kieran told me. If you want it, I traced the edges of the frame, this tangible evidence of a beginning I couldn't remember but that had shaped everything that followed. I do want it, very much. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, I sat alone in the room Kieran had prepared for me. My room. The shelves of books he'd chosen based on Julian's reports of my interests. The desk positioned to catch the morning light. The telescope pointed at stars he had hoped to name with me someday. I placed the framed photograph on the nightstand, where I would see it first thing every morning. A reminder that my story hadn't begun with Richard's cruelty, or ended with his downfall. My story had started with love, imperfect, interrupted, but real. Tomorrow, I would begin making this room truly mine. I would move my few belongings from the guest room, rearrange furniture to suit my preferences, add posters and personal touches that reflected who I was now, not who Kieran had imagined I might be. But tonight, I simply sat in the quiet, allowing myself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened since that rainy night 3 months ago. The pain and humiliation of being thrown out, the shock of meeting Kieran, the complicated relief of watching Richard's downfall, the gradual healing of my relationship with my mother, the slow, steady building of trust with the father I was just beginning to know. Outside, clouds parted to reveal a full moon, casting silver light through the window. In that gentle illumination, I opened the journal Mrs. Reynolds had given me and began to write, the words flowing easily for the first time in months. The night rain in Dallas was merciless, beating down on me as if the sky itself wanted me erased. I stood there, on the sidewalk outside the only house I had ever known, clutching a trash bag full of my clothes. My stepdad's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and cold. "You're not my real son! Pack your things and get out!" The words had cut deeper than any blade. Inside, my 18th birthday cake still sat untouched, its candles melting into pools of wax. My mother hadn't spoken a word to defend me. My friends had stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure what to say. And then, headlights. A sleek black limousine slowed to a stop. The tinted window hummed as it lowered, and the driver leaned out, his face calm yet deliberate. "Lucas," he whispered, "your real father has been waiting for you." My heart froze. In that instant, Every lie, every silence, every cruel word of rejection collapsed into one terrifying, exhilarating question. Had my real father been alive all along? The answer, I would learn, was yes. He had been there all along, watching, waiting, fighting for the chance to know me, to claim me, to bring me home. And home, I finally understood, wasn't about walls or roofs or even shared DNA. Home was about being claimed, about being chosen again and again, even when circumstances made it difficult. Home was about belonging, not because you had nowhere else to go, but because someone had created a space specifically for you in their world, in their heart. On my 18th birthday, I thought I had lost everything. Instead, I found my way home.